Thank you so much for letting me have this slot here. I believe somebody shifted it around so I could sneak in. So I really appreciate being able to present this work. This is some ongoing work on, I'm starting to look in more detail at some of the interdisciplinary research on memory and dreams in both philosophy and cognitive science. So for this particular presentation, this is my way of getting a little bit of feedback on a chapter I'm writing for the for a companion, I think is an Oxford Companion of Memory that's coming up in a couple of years. So this is very new stuff. Apologies if I rely a little bit heavily on my notes because this is very new. So thank you very much for having me here. And just the outline of I'll just read off my notes here. Okay, sorry. I can't even remember preparing this talk now. Oof. Okay, I'm just messing with you. I was just acting out a very common dream that I often. Were you worried for a second? I saw Karsten thinking, "Oh, do I get up and do something?"
It seemed too much unlike you, right? Could hide the panels.
I'll just do that. Just continue.
Got you all worried for a second. Yeah, so I just wanted to represent the kind of dream I often have, and perhaps you as people who give talks, maybe do teaching, also have yourself. You're giving a talk, you stand up, and you haven't prepared anything, and you're completely wiped, and you can't remember why you're there, you can't remember what's going on. Sometimes the topic is something that you're actually very knowledgeable about, like dreams and memory, which I'm pretty knowledgeable about, but you can't forget anything else. And sometimes you're just in a situation which you shouldn't be in. So a colleague of mine said she was doing a lecture on surfing. This philosopher of ethics was doing a lecture on surfing, and she doesn't know how to do any surfing. And so this is an example of one of the kinds of deficits in memory that we have in dreams. So I want to approach okay. That would be really bad if it was actually empty for the rest of the talk. I want to approach this idea of memory deficits in dreams from some of the work that I've done in the past is about what kind of implications come from our poor memory of dreams after we wake up from them. So I'll talk a little bit about that. I'll give you a little bit of the empirical background on that and some of the philosophical issues that arise from this. Then I want to get a little bit more philosophical by drawing in some of the specific theory of memory. So what do we mean when we say memory? We all have an idea about what a memory is, but what distinguishes a mental state as being a memory mental state from some kind of other non-memory mental state? And I'll look at generally two main theories of memory, the causalist theory, which is the more intuitive one, and then the anticausalist one, which is less intuitive, but when you think about it, maybe it becomes more appealing, and see what kind of specific implications there might be for those two theories of memory. So in terms of our memory of dreams after we wake up, given all of the background I'll talk about in terms of remembering the dreams, how good are we at remembering them, what could be said for the memory of a dream being a memory at all? So there might be some room for us to reject the idea that a memory of a dream is actually a memory, if it's sufficiently degraded and having several other features. Then I'm going to switch focus to something that's very new for me, that I'm just starting to think about, some more puzzles to do with the dreams themselves. So within the dreams, we also draw on memory from our waking lives. We draw on memory from waking lives in a variety of what I think of as interesting ways. So you might be dreaming and remember something, like I can or can't remember something that I'm trying to think about right now. Or you might have an experience in the dream that somehow reflects a memory in a slightly different way. So it seems to be there's a difference between drawing upon a memory, then you could say acting out something that has actually happened to you for the second time. And then the extreme case I'm going to refer to as recall memories. Recall memories are pretty rare. Recall memories are those memories in which you just relive an experience from waking life. So I'm not sure if I've ever had one of these myself, but they're much more common in people who have undergone trauma, or specifically people with PTSD. They might replay very similarly to the original experience, so they relive their experiences. It's also possible for you to, say, go on a lunch date and then dream of replaying it, although less common than the case with PTSD. So given our causalist and anticausalist debate about what memory is, what should we say about these dreams? Should we call these dreams memories, or should we call them some kind of other mental state? And then, of course, I gotta add extra layers of weird puzzle. So when we remember the recall dreams, what do we say about the mental states that are memories of the memory dreams that are memories? Simple. So how should we classify these kind of experiences, one could say? To my knowledge, nobody has written on this particular puzzle, and you can see why it's very convoluted and specific, but it should be a fun puzzle to think about. Okay, so firstly, what are dreams? Dreams, huge debate about what we should make of the mental state that is the dream. I just wrote a book on it. I should have brought the book, and I could have used it as a prop. Now, I did forget one thing, so that's keeping with the theme. Just wrote a book on this idea of the nature of dreams. So the main theory of dreams is that they're hallucinations, a standard view, you could say, and it's probably the view that most of you have about your own dreams, especially when you wake up from having a very vivid dream, kind of you snap out of it, and then you go, oh, well, it was just a dream. You have the impression that you were just somewhere else, and you may be surprised that you didn't realize it was a dream because maybe it was super weird, but it feels like you were there. You might have been moving around, picking up things, talking with people, interacting with stuff. It might have been quite a boring, mundane dream. You might have been here. Oh no, that would be a really exciting dream. You might have been here, having a great time, sitting down, listening to a talk, for example. You might be giving a talk and so forth. So a lot of these dreams we have, it seems like they're a type of hallucination. More specifically, we might refer to them as embodied and embedded. So we have the sense of being in a body. That body is embedded within an environment. And you could call that environment a three-dimensional world model. Events happen over time, not like snapshots. And it appears that we just experience them as if they are like being awake, except a hallucination. While this happens, we're shut off from the real world, mostly. Our bodies are paralyzed, and a good thing that too, because if you have a disorder called REM, sleep behavior disorder, you act out your dreams, and as you can imagine, it's very dangerous. You can injure yourself and others around you, but good thing that we're paralyzed. We often have very bizarre experiences. You fly, There are weird animals, or people have changing faces or morphing discontinuity, these kind of things. Our cognition is altered, so we might be real stupid, as they say in the literature. I think they refer to that as the dumb dream brain, or maybe it's just me that refers to it that way. You're not very good at thinking, reflecting, metacognition. You don't think about your own thoughts. You don't pay attention to things. You're not curious about why things are weird. So there's all of these cognitive features that affect how you experience or how you think about the dream world. There are alternatives. I'm not going to talk about these in too much detail, but just a couple of alternatives so you know of the different views of dreams. There's also this imagination model that says that dreaming is like a vivid imagination that occurs while we're asleep. So the best way to think of that, in my opinion, would be you close your eyes, you let your mind wander imagistically, say. So you close your eyes, you think about being on a beach, you think about getting up and diving into the water. That kind of imagination, unless you have aphantasia, which some people can't actually imagine visually. If suddenly you're like, oh hey, I can't imagine visually, I never realized, then you might have undiagnosed aphantasia. But usually you can bring up a picture of an environment and interact with it, but it doesn't feel like you're there. It's kind of a weak representation. It doesn't seem realistic. It doesn't seem like, if I can also imagine something that's superimposed on the real environment. If I imagine there's an apple there, so exciting, it doesn't seem like I can interact with it. There's a lot of recent discussion about maybe dreams are just like that, and the reason we think they're hallucinations is just because we are not very rational or able to attend to the dream scenario when we're asleep. So I won't go into that detail, those arguments in too much detail, just to give you some alternatives. The illusion model applies mostly to our experience of the body while we're asleep. Some people argue, Jenny Wint, for example, argues that at least our experience of our body is actually an illusion instead of an imagination or a hallucination. So an illusion is when you perceive something real in the environment, but it's altered in some way, like this illusion, if it works. Not every illusion works on every person, but when I look at that, to me it looks like the ball is kind of rolling around this shape. So it's not a hallucination because this picture, the color and the shapes are real, but the movement is illusory. So some aspect of the experience is not real. So the illusion model of the dream body would be that while you're in your bed, although you're mostly shut off from the environment, you feel sensations from your body. So your arms twitch, your eyes move especially. You feel the movement in your eyes, or at least it's processed. You feel maybe the warmth of the sheets or the sheets rubbing against your body, and your body or your mind, reinterprets that as stimulus coming from the dream environment. And most of you have probably experienced something like you hear a sound in the dream, and it's like some music or something like, oh, that's nice music, and then you wake up and it was actually your alarm. So that sound kind of goes into the dream. So most of the sensations we don't realize they're coming from the real environment because they're just like feeling of cloth or something like that. Okay. So those are some alternatives. My particular view is that dreams kind of shift in and out of different modes of experience, perhaps in relation to, and likely in relation to the stage of sleep that you're in. So REM sleep, the sleep when your eyes are moving around really quickly, rapid eye movement, probably correlates with hallucinatory dreams. NREM sleep probably correlates with more imagistic dreams and so forth. But for the purposes of this talk, the important thing is that there's good evidence to suggest that at least some dreams, especially those dreams that tend to wake you up and that you remember, are some type of hallucinatory experience that represents the virtual world that you interact with and believe to be real at the time. So, what happens then is we remember them sometimes, and then we wake up, and if you're my partner, you tell me about it. He has a real good memory of dreams. Ironically, I have terrible memory of dreams. Anyone here remember a dream every night, just out of curiosity? Every night? Once or more than once a week, or once a week? And less than once a week? Once a month-ish. Yeah, okay. So you're the normal ones, don't you worry? We're the weird ones. So statistically speaking, people tend to remember 2-3 dreams a week. So that's normal-ish, average dream memory. Really bad though. So you're normal, but you're terrible. It's the human condition. So why is that so terrible? Well, because you're dreaming a lot more than that. You're dreaming multiple times a night. You're dreaming maybe half the time you're asleep, or more, which is very surprising if you just think about how many memories you have of dreaming. Okay. So nearly everyone dreams, unless you have some kind of condition or lesion in the brain. Nearly everyone dreams. Some people never remember their dreams, unless they're in experimental conditions, in which they do. So nearly all of us dream, and it's some sort of conscious experience that's in sleep, most likely hallucinations for the purposes of this talk. It's generally agreed that we remember dreams when we wake up. There's a theory that was kind of floating around in between the 50s and the 70s that we kind of just make up stories when we wake up. I have flirted with that idea in some of my research, but there's very good evidence to suggest that our mental states on waking reflect something happening in our minds while we're asleep. Okay. So I looked up dumbest looking animal for that picture. It's a hairy rhino. Very cute. So the main questions for me are the memories that we have about our dreams genuine memories? They reflect some kind of mental state that happens in dreams. I'll allow for that for this talk. But are they genuine memories, or are they some kind of other mental state? Can dreams themselves be some kind of memory? In which conditions would we call a dream a memory, if at all? And finally, if yes to two, what does that say about our memories of these mental states after we wake up? Okay. All right. So I do want to exclude made-up reports, which are a thing. Why would we make up reports? Read the paper Christine and I wrote about this, that people have a whole bunch of motivations for just lying about their dreams. One might be that you just have a really embarrassing, gross dream and you would never admit to doing that, even in your dream, against your will. But children tend to make up reports. So if you have children, you may have noticed something like, you want to have a conversation with your child when you wake up in the morning. So, oh, what did you dream about? It's very common. A lot of parents ask their kids about their dreams. It's a nice conversation starter. And the kid starts saying something, and then you look very interested. And so they keep talking. And then eventually you start thinking, my 3-year-old, so this is a friend and colleague of mine. My 3-year-old daughter told me of her dream this morning. There was a black and red monster, and sometimes it turned gray and white. And there was an owl that protected her. And I got enthusiastic about her dream. And then I got the feeling that she made up another white owl. And I have a few examples of this. Eric Twitzgable, who's a philosopher and cognitive scientist in the US, he also talked to his kids about dreams. And he was asking one of his children about their dreams. And they were like, oh, yes, I had a dream. And I kind of looked around at the table, and their eyes kind of set on the salt shaker. And I said, oh, I had a dream about salt. So just to be a cool person that reports their dreams. Then you wake up and then you tell people your dreams and they're not interested anymore. So okay, we might self-deceive ourselves about our dreams. But despite the fact that sometimes we might have a reason to lie about our dreams, let's focus on those situations in which you don't have a reason to lie. So you might not be lying, but are you reporting accurately. So as I've said before, our memory of dreams is terrible. Alan Hobson, who recently passed away, a big dream researcher from the States, said, "I'm a relatively good dream recaller. I consistently record them. So most people don't try to record their dreams. Even I don't do this. And that increases your memory if you do try to recall them. But despite his motivation and interest in his own dreams, he only managed to record about one per month in a diary that he kept over 30 years. If we assume that I have as few as 5 dreams a night, which is conservative, as I said before, we might be dreaming half the time we're asleep. My recall rate is 400 out of 54,000, less than 1%. If I was that amnestic and waking, I would be in the mental hospital. So that seems right. You might say, I don't remember most of what happened yesterday. And okay, fair enough. You might, not remember what just happened an hour ago. But if you were flying on an elephant an hour ago, you would probably remember it. But if you were flying on an elephant, in reality, like, conceive of you doing something really out there, versus if you were flying on an elephant in a dream half an hour ago, chances are you wouldn't remember it, unless you wake up during that dream. So waking up during the dream might be necessary for remembering most of our dreams. So what's going on? And why do I say, what's the evidence that we are dreaming all the time? Well, as I suggested, in a experimental situation in which you're woken up and asked to report a dream right away. Experimenters are keeping track of your sleep stages, especially if you're woken up during REM sleep. You'll report a dream 90% of the time or more. So differs depending on different experiments. As they get better with their techniques, the number is going up. So I think you could be reporting 95% of the time when woken up from REM. So if we're dreaming in nearly every REM, that's at least 5 dreams a night, because you go through around 5 cycles. And in NREM, using the same conditions to wake people up, they report slightly less than 50% of the time, but still that's quite a lot. People used to think there weren't any dreams happening in these stages of sleep. So you are dreaming a lot, and you forget nearly all of it. And it seems like there's some kind of wiping process going on. That is not a technical term. I just like the image of getting your memory wiped. It seems like you get your memory wiped as you shift between stages of sleep or as you wake up. But the question is, when is this wiping happening? There's more terrible jokes to come, so buckle up. It could be happening on waking. So you do a phase shift between REM sleep, say, and the wake state. Your neurochemistry is changing a lot, your brain activation is changing a lot, and maybe the conditions of waking are not amenable to storing memories, unless someone is there, an experimenter is there ready to ask you about your dream before it kind of gets wiped away. You might have this experience of, having a mental state and then it just gets wiped away, and you might think, oh, something profound just happened, but I have no idea what it is. Alternatively, you might have wiping happening at any stage. Maybe there's a regular memory deficit occurring throughout. So there could be a wipe between wake and dream. Oh, sorry, that's a different one. So between dream and wake is when you wake up, you forget your dream. There also seems to be some kind of blockade in memory when you're in your dream, which I'll talk about more later. So when you're having your dream, you don't remember what's happened before. You don't remember going to sleep. You might forget a lot of information about things that you would have remembered had you remained awake. You might be having a memory wipe between REM sessions. So you have a REM session, so the sleep stages work in cycles. You cycle back to, light sleep and then back into deeper sleep and then to REM again. There might be some kind of wipe happening between these stages, or they might be happening just at regular intervals. So something's happening, I forgot that. So I'm in my dream, I forgot what just happened. Other things are happening, I forgot what just happened. Imagine the movie Memento, if anyone's seen that. The guy's memory is getting wiped every 3 minutes or something. So your dream brain might be like that, constantly just the information of what's happened just goes away. Very difficult to distinguish between these kind of theories of memory deficit, because if you're just forgetting things when you wake up, how could you work out when the wipings happen? Evidence that the last example happens sometimes is that people can sometimes wake up and only report what happened just in the last kind of few seconds. Oh, I was here, but I can't remember what happened before. So there's some evidence that all these different types of memory deficit may occur. So that's some evidence of the poor memory of dreaming. But other things that will be relevant to what I talk about is going to be the fact that in relation to poor memory, and perhaps for other reasons, we also have a confabulation problem with dream reports. People make stuff up unintentionally. And we do this with all kinds of memory reports. So you're trying to remember what happened a year ago, and confabulation means you kind of cobble together the story without intentionally lying about it. So a friend of mine had an example of walking down this pathway when he was a little child, and he remembers it as you usually remember an event, as some kind of narrative in your mind, but he knows that couldn't have possibly happened because he was never living at this house when he was a little child. So he knows that the memory is false, but he still experiences it as if it's memory, and probably what's happened is he's kind of put together an experience of going down this pathway when he was an adult with an experience of going down somewhere else as a child, and put the two experiences together. You probably had something like this. It's just this particular example is very clear because he knew it couldn't possibly have happened. So we tend to do that in all kinds of memory, much worse so for dreams because of the really poor memory. Also because of other features of the dreams themselves. They're really bizarre, and if something happens that doesn't make sense, we might not be able to remember it very well. A lot of what we rely on to report a memory is the idea of a narrative of an event. So what happened after this? Well, the scream must have happened after the crash, because that's the way it makes sense. So you see a car crash, and you remember a certain series of events based on what makes sense, not necessarily what's been stored in your memory. But dreams don't have to make sense, so we can't rely on that. Anything can happen after anything else. There's no way to reality check. So you think of your memory, you think, can that have happened? No, it couldn't have, because the order of events is wrong. You can do that for waking memory, you can't do that for dream memory. Also, we can rely on external cues for waking memory. You have photos, you have other people, you talk to people. If you've ever reminisced, which is one of the delights of coming back to a country that you haven't been in a few years, and you reminisce about, oh, I remember the good old days 4 years ago when I was here. and you say, oh, I remember this happened, and somebody says, oh yeah, but then this happened, and you kind of work together and put the story of the memory together. You can't do that for dreams because you're the only one there. It's completely personal. It's made up by your brain. And you could say, well, what about like neuroimaging, some kind of objective technique? People are starting to use those to try to image dreams, but the technology is very limited at the moment. So I think we're at the stage where if you scan someone's brain over and over and over again, you might be able to predict certain themes in the dream or certain objects that the person saw, but you can't like record a dream report by looking at someone's brain. So it's very personal and very expensive. I mean, you're never going to do this with just people. Sneak in someone's room, put them in a EEG or something like that. It's not possible. Or shove them in an MRI. We have attenuation of long and short-term memory in our dreams. As I said before, we can't remember things that happened before we went to sleep, and we might forget what has just happened before in the dream. We have way better memory during lucid dreams. When you realize that you're dreaming, it seems like the cognitive capacity that allows you to become aware that you're dreaming is heightened in various ways. So your memory is on average better. You're able to reflect, do more metacognition. You can tell if something is weird. You can focus more and so forth. So people who have lucid dreams are more likely to report them in more detail and hypothetically more accurately. Also, when you're lucid dreaming, you can signal that you're dreaming. So you can kind of compare the physiology of the body with specific reports, specific aspects of reports. For example, if you signal with your eyes back and forth, that's the standard signal. I realize I'm dreaming. And then something specific is happening while you're doing the signal. You have a timestamp for when that particular experience happened in the particular dream. So lucid dreams allow us to do more with dreams, but they're quite difficult to achieve. They're very rare, and you can train to do them, but it's difficult to do research on them. Okay, so some of the content of dreams is carried over from waking into your dream. So you might have poor access to your autobiographical memories. Autobiographical memory is just memory of yourself in doing an event, you're doing something or experiencing something. You may lack some access to autobiographical memories. So let's say you had coffee with your friend yesterday, and in your dream you don't remember that. But some of that might get into the actual experience of the dream. So your friend is in your dream. You don't remember having coffee with them 2 days ago, but you're dreaming about them. So your dream content, or your dream generation process, is drawing on memory resources, even if you can't access the memory yourself. So it doesn't seem like we're entirely shut off from, or we can't be entirely shut off from memory. If you are entirely shut off from memory when you were dreaming, it's hard to conceive of what the dream would be like. So I might have a dream in which there's a tree and there's a building. At minimum, my brain is drawing on my knowledge of what a tree and a building looks like. So that's a type of memory resource. But that's similar for any mental state. So if you want to imagine being on a beach, obviously your imagination requires memory of what a beach is like. So is this the same as remembering waking? It draws on memory resources. So this is a key question. It draws on memory resources, but we don't say that any time we draw on memory resources, we are remembering something. Memory might be misplaced as perception or hallucination. Yeah.
I was curious, does memory resources also include embodiment? Is it
Yeah.
see
So
a lot of imagery and
yes. So I'm talking mostly about autobiographical memories, but you also have memories of facts. So semantic memories. Episodic memories are memories of skills. So like your memory of how to do something. Is that what you mean? Yeah, that's very interesting. But yeah, I haven't particularly talked about something in this talk. I think the skill-based memories are really interesting for dreams because sometimes you just forget how to do things in your dreams. So I don't know, you're playing the piano. Let's say you're a pianist, and you just forget how to do it. Yeah, so those are important for memory as well.
but would this also include memory resources of sense of how it feels? Like you were in a room 3 days ago with somebody and it felt a certain way, and then that isn't considered an embodied memory that would also play into your dreams?
Yeah, I think so. I think you would have to be drawing on all sorts of, so what something feels like, if, so on the assumption that some of our bodily sensations are not illusions, because if they're illusions, they're just you drawing on real environmental stimuli. But if you're hallucinating having a body, then you are drawing on memory resources of what it's like to feel to have a body. So yeah. People report tasting things and smelling things also in their dreams, and those would draw on memories as well. Because I recall a report of somebody, he was in a lucid dream and he was tasting wine, and he said, "Oh, this tastes just like, wine that I have tasted before." So you are drawing on the resources of memory to create the experience of tasting wine, and then you're also drawing on your memory to associate that with something that you've had before. So, so I think that's very important. But yes, so for the purposes here, which states are memories and which states are something else? Another factor is, so you might be in the dream experiencing something, all of which draws on your knowledge and memory of what it's like to experience those things, unless it gets it wrong and it's a bizarre dream and everything is different. But research suggests that most dreams are actually far more mundane than you expect. It's just you tend to remember the weird ones. So you're in a relatively mundane dream, and then a memory pops into your head and you, while dreaming, remember something. So our memory access is reduced, but not completely eradicated. So you might have memories of something that you did a week ago. So you have all these kind of different mental states that are drawing on memory in different ways. Memory can be extremely poor in the dream of our waking lives. It might be so bad that you forget who you are. But it probably isn't going to be so bad that you have utter amnesia, which I'm not even sure that's a thing. So amnesia so bad that you don't even remember what a tree looks like, for example. There has to be some kind of content in the dream that reflects reality. It's possible to have a dream which is just random sensations and you're completely absorbed by that and you have no awareness of reality. Those dreams can happen and they can be reported, but they would be very difficult to report because it's not clear what you should say about how do I describe that experience unlike any other experience I've had before. So those are either very rare or just very hard to report, so we don't have much evidence about them. It seems like when we're dreaming, the brain can do all sorts of chaotic stuff. So it might be activated in ways that just don't happen when you're awake. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to go on to my puzzles before I run out of time. Okay. So causal theory of memory is the intuitive theory according to which for a mental state to be a memory, it has to have some kind of causal relationship with your experience of some event. Okay, so there's lots written on what kind of causal relationship that should be. I'm not an expert on all the different kind of aspects or theories of that. One way of describing that is that when you have an experience, or when you have some experiences, a memory trace is laid down in your brain in some sense, and that provides some kind of causal connection between the initial event and then the recall, memory, or so forth. So in the literature, the laying down or the memory trace is also referred to as an engram, and when you replay the memory, it's called ecphory. But I might just say like memory trace or recall to keep it simple. So here's a description of this view. Remembering requires a causal connection between the event and its subsequent representation in memory, and this is sustained by a memory trace. So the link is somehow informational, so it gives you information about the past, and it's in some way causal. there are some misconceptions about what it's like to recall. It's not replaying. So we might think, have an experience, gets stored in the mind as a memory trace, and then that memory trace just fires and replays the thing. More recently, we're starting to think of memory as a new experience on each retrieval, or a construction of an event. So memories are blended, not laid down independently and once for all, but every time you remember, or recall, or ecphory, you reconstruct rather than reproduce. Okay. So if that's the case, what's the difference between memory and, say, imagination? Well, there has to still be some kind, even though memories get changed every time you remember them over time, there's still a causal link, and the purpose of memory is to give you information about the past that is as accurate as possible. So memories are modified, but they can still be genuine if they're not modified to the extent that they don't represent the past. So you could be a constructivist causal theorist still. So you think memory is linked with some kind of cause, but also constructed. There's also anti-causalist approaches. Let's say I'm watching a video of my wedding. This is not a real example. I do not have such a video. But I'm watching this video. An anti-causalist view, usually an anti-causalist will say, look, a lot of memories do have a causal connection with past event, but this is not by definition necessary. So you can conceive of mental states that are memories that have no such causal link. So let's say I'm watching this video of the wedding, of my wedding, and I'm saying, yeah, what a great day that was. But for whatever reason, I completely have no memory of that day whatsoever. So I've totally forgotten the wedding. But then I watch this video, and later I have a memory of being at the wedding that's based on the video of the wedding, that happens to be accurate of the wedding, even though my memory trace is not of the original experience. So a causal theorist will say, well, that's just not a memory. Or not, I should say, it is a memory, but it's not a memory of the wedding. It's a memory of the video of the wedding. Whereas the representationalist thinks that the goal of memory is to accurately represent past events that you have experienced, and it doesn't matter if it's in the way that the causal theorist requires. Okay. So for both of these theories, dream memory might be problematic, irrespective of what kind of causal or anti-causal view you have, because of these things that I mentioned before. Inability to check for objectivity, inability to check for plausibility, prone to confabulation, representing internal states rather than events, and something I didn't mention before, just the fact that memory of dreams is memory of something that didn't happen. We remember a dream as if something happened, but that thing never actually did happen. So given all these things together, we might think that a memory of a dream might be so confabulated, so degraded, that we might class it as a different kind of mental state altogether than a memory, by either causal or by representationalist views, because causally speaking, perhaps the engram is just not appropriately laid down and does not have the right causal relationship between the original experience, and anti-causal theory that's just not doesn't give you access to correct information about the original experience. Okay, so we might ask if they're even memories at all. Okay, so this is just one side of the puzzles that I'm thinking about. Are the memories we have of dreams actually memories? Okay, but let's look at the different issue, the dreams themselves. Okay, so, and some of you might be annoyed with me because I give you no answers to any of these things. Just giving puzzles. Are they memories? You decide. If you want to know my particular view, I think that it's going to be plausible to say that some of our memories or dreams would be counted as memories. Some won't, and it'll be hard to distinguish which is which. So are dreams themselves memories? So in the dream, you're having a dream. Could that dream be a memory? Okay. So continuity theory of dreams is a theory that I've mentioned before, described before, but I can't remember if I mentioned the theory is called continuity themes of dreams, that dreams reflect waking concerns and experiences. Discontinuity theorists say that they represent weird stuff that is not about reality, and I think both seem to describe some dreams. I don't think one theory is true and the other is false. But some dreams certainly seem to reflect waking experience. Many of our dreams do. But the fact that dreams rely on memory sources to produce content, even if they don't reflect events that have happened, if you see your friend in a dream, their face might rely on a memory of what their face looks like. So all sorts of ways in which to create the kind of dreams we report, the dream must rely on memory resources to varying extents, even if you lack access to your autobiographical memories as memories. You still somehow, I say you, but your dream generation process draws on this information. So you dream about your friends, yes, those friends, and this draws on your memory. You might say, oh, but sometimes I dream about a friend, but they look different. This is an issue called binding failure, when the different aspects of experience kind of fail to come together normally. You might be delusional in your dream and dream of your friend's face, but you think it's your teacher and all these kind of things. Those are actually quite rare. More likely, you dream of your friend, it looks like your friend. Okay. As I said before, imagination also draws on memory resources. So right now, imagine that your friend who lives somewhere else, so they couldn't possibly be here, imagine them walking in the door right now. Okay, they look like your friend. You might imagine some of the emotions you would have when this happened. You might be surprised or happy to see them, or not happy to see them, depending on what kind of friend it is. Imagining draws on memory too. We don't say imagining is memory. We need mental states to draw on memory without those mental states necessarily being memory. So I'm going to say that just because a dream draws on memory doesn't mean you have access to memory in the way that you usually do. You can't bring up specific autobiographical events in your life, and those dreams themselves are not memories. But, okay, here's an example of a dream that's seemingly not a memory, but you can see also how it draws on memory. So I'm in, it's from a Sleep and Dreams database, so it's a real dream report from an experience. I'm in LAX, but it could be a casino. There's a mass of people. It's like a mosh pit. It feels threatening. A TSA agent shows me around. They have a 3D tattoo that moves around on her arm. It's like a unicorn, and it comes alive. And there's a child with a stuffed animal. It's part dog, part giraffe. It moves and makes sounds and eats, but it doesn't poop. It's a weird thing to add to the report. Okay. These events can't be based on autobiographical memories. There aren't, at the moment, three-dimensional moving tattoos. Although one day, that would be creepy. What about these EPS dreams that I mentioned before? So the kind of dreams people report, you're in a car crash, you relive it in your dream. Okay, this seems to do more than simply drawing on memory. It seems to be replicating your experience in the same way that you experienced before. And there's some complexities as to what cognitively might be going on while this occurs. You might be unaware that you are replaying a memory. You've forgotten the original memory and you're reliving it, but in your own experience, living it for the first time. You might be aware that this has happened before, but not aware exactly what's going on. Like, this is happening. You might just think, this is happening again, oh no, and you don't realize it's a dream. Or alternatively, you could realize that you're in a dream, so you become lucid, and then the memory just plays out. Or, it might be the case that you become lucid and then you can change it. You can stop it from happening or something like that. So there's all sorts of different kind of classifications within that type of dream that could be occurring. And this is a known phenomenon. There's some debate about whether a dream can exactly replay an event. So here is Hartman's analysis. He did a lot of work on, I think it was specifically PTSD, veterans with PTSD, but he found that the dreams were never exactly the same as the original experience, despite what the person reporting the dream said. So a veteran will say something like, the dream was just the way it was. I was in a foxhole, there were noises around me. A shell explodes, just like the way it was. But there's always some clue when you examine the report that it couldn't have possibly happened that way. So often people die at the end. So the original experience, say the shell went off nearby, but in the dream the shell goes off right in front of the person and they die and wake up. That couldn't have possibly happened because the person is still alive, obviously. Okay. So Hartman says in every single dream he analyzed there was at least one important change. So he rejects the idea that dreams replay events. But I think that's wrong in terms of what we describe memory to be. If we allow that memory is reconstructive, and we're to say that dreams never replay memories, then we're holding dreams up to a higher standard than normal memories. So we're saying, well, normal memories are reconstructive, but if a dream is not entirely accurate, then it's not a memory. That doesn't seem to make any sense. So if you have a memory and one thing has changed, let's say the perspective, this is a common thing. You have an event, you remember something, but instead of remembering it, looking from where you're, so you think about this talk tomorrow, instead of seeing it from where you are now, you see it from looking down up there. That is more likely to happen with traumatic memories, so I hope that you don't have that memory. Oh, it's so bad. But we don't say that that's a false memory. We still allow that those are memories. So if you say the ending was different, so it wasn't a memory, that seems too high a standard to have. So, okay, so far, maybe these dreams are memories. Okay. But memories aren't hallucinations. So close your eyes, you think about whatever happened yesterday. You're not suddenly there, and thank goodness. That would be terrible. If every time you remembered something, you brought something to mind, you were put there again, your life would be unlivable. You'd be jumping in between different hallucinations, right? But so dreams put you back where it was. It's an immersive virtual world. Memories don't do that. So is this a reason to reject recall dreams as memories? The question we might ask about this is, so should the mode of presentation mean that we classify a dream as different? These very specific types of recall dreams. Do we classify them different because their mode of presentation? The mode of presentation is hallucination, whereas the mode of presentation in memory is usually more like imagination, right? It feels like what it looks like to remember is more like an imagination than a hallucination. The causalist says that getting us in contact with the past and allowing for mental time travel is what memory does, and it has this causal relationship between the past and now. Doesn't seem like anything in there specifies what kind of mode of presentation is required. So the causalist might allow that the dream is a memory, this specific type of dream. Anticausalist, even more so, accurately representing past events using a reliable method and not even necessarily causal. So if a dream really accurately represents, and it even feels like you're back where you were, that might be a reason even more so to say that that is a memory. So when we then wake up and remember the dream that is a memory, then you have this weird kind of puzzle. Okay, sorry, about a couple minutes left. I'll just finish up. Okay, so think of this analogy. Philosophers love to write things this way, so I hope that's fine. At T2, so time, at time T2, whatever. Time T2 comes after T1 and time T3 comes last. So T2, you recall an event that occurred at T1. And then at T3, you remember the instance of recall that occurred at T2. So event happens, you remember the event, then you remember remembering the event. Doesn't seem like there's necessarily much difference in terms of remembering an event, remembering a memory of an event is kind of a lot like remembering the event. Is there any difference between just remembering the event and remembering the remembering of the event? If you add details to the memory, so I remember remembering yesterday. So I remember yesterday I was sitting in a cafe and remembering the previous day sitting in a cafe. You add things, you make a new memory of that. But if you're just remembering the memory, then it's unclear whether there's any kind of difference between the initial memory and the second remembering, other than the kind of modifications that generally happen every time you remember something. But if you remember a recall dream, that seems like a completely different thing going on. You're remembering a simulation, not just remembering the memory, the initial memory. You have kind of two experiences replicated in some sense. And remembering either one of them seems to be a different kind of mental state than remembering. Did I confuse anyone yet? Yeah, it's fine. It's good. It's simple. Okay. So, if you're going to say, though, that just because the experience of remembering a recall dream is different than remembering an act of remembering, then you have this kind of phenomenology problem or mode of presentation problem. Just because it's a different mode of presentation and just because the experience of that mode of presentation is different doesn't mean it's not necessarily memory. Okay. So that may not be a good argument against it being a memory. But I think probably the best argument against these kind of mental states being memories are the different functions and the different kind of responses to the environment that cause them. Okay. So normal memory is intentional or unintentional. So sometimes you're trying to remember what happened or remember some kind of fact. Sometimes they just pop into your head. Okay. They let you access past events. And memory is obviously really important. Your lives are very hard if you lack memory of events that you've experienced. But dream memory seems to have a different kind of purpose, if any kind of purpose at all, or at least a different function or different method of generation. So if the recall dream is not related to some kind of trauma, it's super rare. So it's so rare it doesn't seem like it could be some kind of, provide any kind of function in your as a memory. It doesn't seem to have any use. But the more common ones are in relation specifically to trauma, almost never intentional. So you don't intentionally relive your trauma, probably. It's conceivable that you could, through some kind of therapy, intentionally bring one about through lucid dreaming, maybe, but generally they're never intentional. They're very specific to trauma. They're very rare, especially if not trauma-related. It's not reliable or useful. They're going to happen in a dream. You can't use them in the way that we use memory in our lives. They might serve a specific function to trauma or just be a symptom of trauma. So if it's some kind of function of trauma, it might be helping you recover from your PTSD in some way. Or it might do the opposite. It might prevent you from recovering from your PTSD. So it might simply be a dysfunctional symptom of PTSD. So it seems like they have take up different space in our mental lives. Okay, and I'll leave this final puzzle. Remembering. You have a memory of a dream, which is a memory dream in which you remember in that dream a memory. What do we say about those mental states? So you remember in your dream being a foxhole. You also so this guy who made the report before, he remembers being in the foxhole. He also remembers initially being in a foxhole, but he also remembers that in the in the dream foxhole, he had a memory of the party that he had before leaving for war. Okay, so this is just something that I really haven't thought of in enough detail. I'm not sure if I'm going to write about this in the chapter because it's probably too much stuff. If such dreams are memories, when we wake up, we might remember remembering within remembering, which is, in conclusion, somewhat perplexing. So no answers for that there. So in conclusion, memory of dreams is degraded in all sorts of ways, and there are all sorts of interesting features, which might make us question whether memories of dreams are even memories in terms of causal or anticausal theories of memory. Most dreams draw on memory sources for the generation process, and those usually aren't memories, but some dreams appear to replay memories during which we're embedded in a hallucination of reliving a memory. We might say that these mental states are memories, but I'm thinking that the functional argument that I had at the end about they play a different role in cognition seems like a good reason to reject them for being memories. Or being ecphory, if you want to call them like replaying of memories. But I'm open to change my mind if anyone has any different reasoning or further thought about this topic. So thank you for sticking with me.